What's up, folks? Casual Dad here, and this is a video for my nephews, but if you are at all interested, this should be useful as well. So I've been playing StarCraft II with my nephews recently. They've just finally discovered the game, and my brother and them have been having a wonderful, wonderful time playing. And they both expressed interest in playing Zerg at some point, but don't have the foundational knowledge to do it, right? So personally, I would say play the campaigns, learn how to do it. That's a great way to go, but I wanted to go ahead and do a crash course as well. Now, I'm a decent player, but this is going to be the basics. I'm not a tournament player. I'm not in any way some kind of elite player, so don't expect anything too over the top. But I'll give you just kind of the fundamentals of how Zerg work and how they differ from the other two factions. It does seem like Terran are kind of a natural pick for Zerg, and they do... Terran are kind of a natural pick for StarCraft and RTSs in general, and then Protoss are fairly similar, so both kind of translate well into other game systems. And so my nephews have done a great job kind of falling into how those work, but they haven't really jumped into Zerg yet. So just to outline it, so of course every single faction has their own supply. It is supply depots for Terran, it is pylons for Protoss. For Zerg, it is the Overlord, which is mobile, has a vision range, is an actual unit that you summon and can move around the map. Now that's awesome because you get a mobile scout and a flying unit that can also turn into a flying transport, so you'll never have a shortage of flying transports if you go ahead and build those. Something that can generate creep, just can drop creep down, which makes your units faster. And can actually, if you really want to get trolly, you can drop creep somewhere to prevent an opponent from building. So if you see an SCV headed towards a mineral cluster, you can drop creep, and then for at least temporarily, that SCV will not be able to build anything on that space. So that's great, but that's getting too complicated. Then also the main detector for Zerg is the Overseer, which is the evolution of the Overlord, which gives it the ability to see cloaked or invisible units. Now the whole sort of fundamental piece of the Zerg is the hatchery. That's the main building for the entire faction, and the only building that I'm aware of, I think, that actually generates units. It's the only thing that builds stuff in the entire faction, so they're extremely valuable and you want to keep them safe. So, and then the hatchery itself, a couple quirks about that. It generates creep by itself, as you can see. It is fast to build and it only costs 300 minerals to build instead of the 400 that the Nexus and Command Center have to generate too. Another quirk about Zerg is that every single one, well, we'll get into that. So go ahead and go here. And so Zerg are uniquely powerful because they have this building that can build anything from a basic barracks or from a core building all the way on up to a like an advanced starport. It does their most basic and their most advanced infantry for their most basic units. Sorry, does everything from the most basic units to their most advanced units. The hatchery is key. The other key piece though is the spawning pool. This is critical to every single thing that Zerg build. Every single unit, aside from the drone and the Overlord, requires a spawning pool. And so even if you have the kind of advanced structures you need to spawn other stuff, if you don't have your spawning pool, you're kind of hosed. Also, the hatchery produces units by slowly producing larvae, which then can be mutated into cocoons that then have the usual progress bar and go into other units. Now, one thing I want to highlight there, actually, let me pause this. I need to turn down the sound because that's probably way too loud. Sure. We'll see how that is. It's too loud for me. It's got to be loud for you guys. So a couple things I wanted to highlight there is that because of the way the Zerg produce larvae, they can build multiple units extremely quickly, but at the same time, hatcheries are really, really expensive compared to other unit-producing buildings like a barracks. So it is really bad to lose them, and you need more as quickly as possible. And that's one of the things that makes Zerg so, and there's my Overlord off scouting, that's one of the things that makes Zerg so uniquely aggressive and expansionistic is they have to expand fast to keep up with the other factions. Because Protoss can build, let's take it, so Protoss can build like 15 warp gates and then produce 15 units at a time, which Zerg can't, but they can if they have multiple hatcheries, plus another thing here too. So just to go through the quick build order, you start with your drones, you collect minerals until you get enough, the 200 to get the spawning pool, and then once you have the spawning pool, you can then kind of build however you want. Once that's under construction, you saw me build some additional drones to go ahead and kind of up my mineral production. And then as soon as I had this up, you'll also see me build a queen right here. The queen is a really crucial piece, and of course whenever you're locked with your supply, you have to start building additional overlords. The queen is really critical for a couple different reasons, and soon you're going to see me start harvesting Vespene here as well, but I'm going minerals first. Because Zerg are very good in the early game, and this is a 4v4 free-for-all, so I have an opponent right here, and I saw him scout me with a drone, so I know that he's there. However, we kind of talked it through and agreed we weren't going to be aggressive right on, so I should also highlight that Zerglings are 50 minerals each, or excuse me, 50 minerals per larva, but each larva mutates into an egg that produces 2 Zerglings. So a Zergling is 25 minerals, which is awesome. They're fast, aggressive, and you saw how quickly I was able to produce 6 of them, opposed to nothing here. Not even a single Marine yet here. Yeah, so I've got 6 Zerglings on the board before anyone else has any offensive units whatsoever. I also have a Queen who could defend against a single unit push, or I will have a Queen, rather. Don't have her yet. And you can see another key thing is that whenever you have one of your builders create a building, it actually turns into that building. So you lose a worker every time you build something, which is a bit of a bummer. Also kind of a strategic highlight here, you'll see these Zerglings are fairly slow. They're pretty quick, but once you've seen Zerglings with the speed upgrade that you see here, they look slow. So I've got a Queen, and just to highlight this, the Queen has 2 abilities. Number 1 is the Creep Tumor. You can put that down, and it can continue to spawn individual creep tumors across the map to give you visibility, and they are cloaked, so they can't be picked up except by detectors. And also spread your creep so that other things can't build there, but just gives you kind of that map control. Now I'm going to pause here real quick, because the second ability is or Spawn Larva, which is what you should be spamming all the time with your queens, because that will take a hatchery, and instead of having 3 larvae, gives it 7, which dramatically increases the amount of stuff you can build and how quickly. So you just want to keep rotating that on all of your nexuses, or all of your hatcheries. So every hatchery should have a queen. That queen should be spamming your larvae growth, so you have that additional unit production. That lets you compete really aggressively with the other kind of spam factions here. So picture these. Both of these have a reactor on them. They're producing 4 Marines per build. As opposed to this, with you have 7 larvae, that will do 14 Zerglings all at once. And they're, yeah, so 14 to 4 is pretty good odds. And I did an early attack, so this is a scouting attack, and you got to see how this goes. And I just threw them in here. These are unupgraded, so again, they're slow, and they attack fairly slowly. So you're going to see these improve dramatically. And this is when I noticed that the Terrans here were attacking each other right out of the gate. So I went in to see what was up, and then decided to do some scouting and check out the kind of utility or resource situation here. And I got a little nervous, both because I didn't want to get into the fight too soon, but then also because they had just killed each other's defenses, and I didn't want to be a jerk. So it's a free-for-all. If you start out too aggressive in the beginning, you immediately become the one everyone goes after, so I didn't want to do that. Note also how quickly you can produce supply with overlords. You can crank these suckers out like crazy, but they do cost 100 minerals each. They're extremely slow, and there is time, and as long as you are supply capped where you need more overlords, you can't build anything else. Also note, I built a first expansion, fairly recently, but I'm already behind my Terran brother. Pulling my Zerglings back just to kind of clear this rock. So I talked to the Protoss guy, and we both agreed not to go down the middle thing because he was going to build defensive structures here, and we didn't want to fight. We got a non-aggression pact. Okay, so talking a little bit more about Zerg, your tech tree, and let's actually look at this real quick. So I got the spawning pool. That's your key critical building you build first thing. And then after that, you have to upgrade your hatchery to a lair, which is the second tier. And the lair then later upgrades to a hive, which you'll see in a second once this finishes. But if you look at what larvae can build into, this stuff the Zerglings require the spawning pool, and then every single other unit after requires a specific building to make it. So Zerg are a lot more centralized in that their unit production is the same hatcheries all the time. But then their tech tree is actually very slow or very specific, where you go specific directions in any way. Because with Terran, you build a starport, you get like 5 units. In Zerg, you build a roach war and you get roaches. But then it does get complicated again, because a lot of these units can evolve. Roaches can evolve into an artillery form. Hydras can evolve into the hidden lurkers that are really good anti-ground. Mutalisks can't evolve anymore, but then Corruptors can mutate into the ground siege unit, the Broodlord. And there are a couple advanced units you're not going to see me use here, so we won't even talk about those much. Bum, 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 bum. You see that larva spawn takes me from 3 to... I just used the 3, so now I have the additional 4, so I go up to that 7. Adding an additional Zerglings to go ahead and take that down, and I believe, yeah, the speed upgrade is coming. So if you're looking at kind of your tech tree, you want to produce a lot of Zerglings early because they're cheap, they're fast, they're really good at dealing with early aggression, and really good at wiping out an opponent's resource generation. So if your opponents are... If they let you get past their defenses, you can do a lot of damage to them early and slow them down so you're able to tech up while they are hampered recovering their economy. So one of the staples of Zerg is early game aggression. Got the Rux. Got this. I'll fairly quickly start making a queen. One tactical piece, so I've upgraded this to a hive. So now my larvae can become basically anything, and that also unlocks my entire tech tree. No, that's just a lair. Okay, I haven't done the hive yet. But I'm building my advanced structure that will... The infestation pit is what opens up the option to make a lair into a hive. Here are the other things here too. This is tricky because this is a roach warren, which gives you roaches, and the spawning pool gives you Zerglings, but then you have to get a baneling nest to evolve Zerglings into banelings, so the evolutions get a little bit thorny. So I prefer to focus on kind of the baseline units that don't have secondary evolutions, which does hold me back strategically, but it does make it easier to kind of understand the faction. Got my queen coming to go ahead and do the larva injection here. Another key thing that I do for every faction, but it's especially effective for my Zerg, is I take my hatcheries, lairs, hives, hatcheries, and I hotkey them all to a single hotkey, usually 0. So that I can select them all at once, and instead of selecting 3 to 7 larvae, I'm selecting 6 to 14. And then as you build up your hatcheries, that gives you more option to like, oh, I'm being attacked by air, let me just spam this button to make all of my anti-air units possible. Oh, and you see how much faster these are with that speed upgrade. Oh, I love it. And we'll check in here in a minute. And so as I've got the Zergling attack going in, I am aggressively teching up so that my follow-up won't be Zerglings, it's going to be some of the more advanced stuff. But I am going to upgrade this as soon as possible, as soon as that hive is up. And here, I know that they're probably building expansion, so I go ahead and take this out. And I didn't have visibility in this, so there was some chattering and definitely some trash talking over here from the Terran. My brother and my younger nephew were definitely poking at each other here. And this was a little bit unfair. So I was giving my older nephew space to kind of tech up and do stuff, and could at any point have just gotten crushed by an overwhelming force over here, and that would have been a bummer. But this was in many ways a practice game, and we were checking out my brother's hardware because his computer was doing some kind of overheating thing. Let's take a quick look, before we get too far in here, let's take a quick look at the Zerg kind of offensive hierarchy. So we've got the spawning pool, and Zerglings are your base, your core. You can produce masses of Zerglings and throw them at stuff and put them in sensitive places throughout the entire game. There's never a moment where spawning like 30 Zerglings will be totally wasted, as long as you're kind of careful using them, which can take time, but you look for an undefended expansion, or you look for a back way into a main base, and they'll do a lot of damage before they go down, and they're so cheap that it doesn't matter when they all die. Not if, when. They will all die. Especially once you get the hive, and can upgrade adrenal glands, which almost doubles their attack speed, which, well, it makes it 1.5 times. Which combined with the speed upgrade, and then the upgrades to armor and weapons you can give them at the evolution pit, which I don't even have one, puts their durability and their damage output through the roof compared to the base version. Let me take a quick look at the units just for a super quick tour. Saw the queen, saw the larva, saw the drones, the basic workers. And then we're looking at overlords or supply. Roaches are armored, and they have a short-range weapon, but they can only attack ground. So they're really good against spam of marines. But otherwise, they do sort of fall apart in the late game because they're not particularly good at anything a little bit tougher than a bio ball of marines. They're fun to play with, but I skip over them because they're dramatically more expensive than Zerglings, slower, and don't offer the same utility as some of the later pieces. But a couple quirks about them: when they burrow, they regenerate extremely quickly, and when there's an upgrade they can take where they can move while burrowed. So while they're invisible, they can move around, pop up, shoot some stuff, pop down, move around, pop up, shoot some stuff, pop down. So it's really fun. Just remember to research burrow at one of your hatcheries, hives, or lairs as early as possible, because otherwise you won't have that when you need it. But they regenerate to full health really fast, because that's one of the quirks of the Roach. They're cool, I just am not very good with them, so don't play them very much. Next up is the Hydralisk, an absolute mainstay of Zerg and one of the standard units from the original StarCraft, so no surprise there that it comes up quite a bit. Attacks air and ground, has a decent long ranged attack, fairly fast, and has upgrades both to attack range and also to its movement speed. They're really good all-rounders. If you want to go Zerg and build just one unit, and nothing but that one unit, Hydralisks are a good pick. Followed by the Mutalisk. So Hydralisks attack air and ground, Mutalisks also attack air and ground. They're very, very fast. They do get fairly expensive, but they're so fast, their projectile weapon bounces, so as you're hitting a swarm of stuff, it's just doing splash damage all over the place. And it's not exactly splash. Oop, we got through the rock. Thought about attacking. But it's kind of splash, so they hit secondary targets for somewhat less damage. But they're super fast, but they're incredibly vulnerable to anti-air. They're really squishy, so anti-air weapons do take them down, and especially Terran Liberators will just wipe them out of the sky. One Terran Liberator will just annihilate Mutalisks, so I have stopped doing Mutalisk meta at all, honestly, against these guys, because it just doesn't work. If you do have tough anti-air defenses and you want to go Mutalisk instead, just don't engage with them. You have to make sure you have a teammate or something else that can cover you from the air and deal with that stuff, because they can just not engage and just constantly attack stuff in squishy places, and you can really harass someone to death quite comfortably. Next up we have Corruptors, which I've been building a lot of recently, and you will see in this game because they are absolute ace in anti-air. They only attack air, but they do a lot of damage extremely quickly, and they are very, very fast. So if you get spammed by carriers or battlecruisers or Tempests, they're an excellent piece to go ahead and respond to that, because they'll chase them down quickly and take them down, and I believe they are armored as well. Or for whatever reason, they don't take as much damage from air units as others do. It's a very effective piece, and I end up spamming the heck out of them because we have, in our own internal family meta, we spend a lot of time just teching to the top level air. And you can see me building 2 additional expansions fairly quickly because I have a bunch of minerals, and I'm expecting to be attacked and running out of resources here. Oh, look at that! And these, I don't know much about these. These are Cyclones. These are new units. One of the newer Terran units. I should have attacked with these guys much earlier. I don't know why I didn't. I think I just forgot about them and was focusing on economy. And if they'd gone for my squishy expands, that would have been really problematic really quickly. Hang on, but let's pause real quick before this gets too much into this. So I was talking about Zerg units. We talked about the anti-air. These 2 I don't use very much. The Infestor does some really cool tricks, but it has no attack itself. What it can do is if you have it close to a Terran command center and you get it in low hit points, this thing can infest it. So it'll go in before it's destroyed, take it over, and from then on, you control it as the Zerg player, and it produces suicide explosive units, the infested Terrans. So it's kind of fun just as a cheesy thing, but it's pretty hard to pull off, because you have to have an Infestor nearby that can do it. And they also have a couple abilities I don't remember, and so I'm going to try this. So Fungal Growth, I believe is a blast that just slows down anything it hits, and then it's got like a cooldown where it slows stuff down as long as it's affected. Microbial Shroud, I believe, is a cloud, just like a dusty cloud that will prevent any ranged attacks from happening within it. So you drop it on a cloud of Zerglings, suddenly anything that was going to shoot at them isn't going to, and any ground stuff that was vulnerable to air is safe now. But it takes a ton of micro to pull that off, and they are expensive, and again, don't have any attack. I believe they also can move while burrowed, but I'm not sure about that. Next up, we have the Swarm Host, which is a big thing that burrows, and then once it's burrowed, it can automatically produce these attack locusts that will fly around and do a bunch of stuff, but I can't figure out how to use these things. They spawn locusts extremely slowly. As near as I can tell, the locusts only attack ground, so we'll just go to skip over them. I have not found them worth it. They are cheap. I'm actually impressed by how cheap they are right now, but yeah. No, I haven't used them. I'll have to figure out some stuff on them. Likewise, Vipers. Vipers are really interesting. They can consume friendly units. They can kill something to gain back some of their energy to use their abilities. Super expensive on Vespene. And they have... I don't know what Blinding Cloud does. I think it removes visibility. It may actually be what I thought Microbial Shroud does. Anyway, I won't get too into it. But the most fun ability that they have is Abduct, where you can just pick a target, it'll send out a tentacle, grab it, and yank it into your stuff. I don't see it being particularly useful, but if you have an opponent who has a line of siege tanks, for example, and they're all out of reach, you can fly one of these in there and just start grabbing their siege tanks off the hill, stick it in the middle of your Zerglings and get it killed without risking the offense of the other siege tanks. So there is some of that, but they're also all of these tinkery castery ones I don't tend to use because they take a ton of micro and don't really work well in multiplayer. Last up, we have the Ultralisk, which can only attack ground, but is super durable, does a ton of damage in a splash, so it will attack an area, like a close-up siege tank, and they are quite quick, too. So if you drop these in someone's base, they can't attack air and will be ripped apart by air attackers, but they ignore the air attackers as well and just do as much damage as they can before they go down, which is what you're going to see me do here. I'm going to do a quick tour of the buildings before I get too distracted here. So we've already talked about the extractor does gas, hatchery does your spawning pool, evolution chamber does your research to improve your armor and weapons of your ground troops. Roach One lets you build roaches. Baneling Nest lets you build banelings, which are a mutation of Zerglings that do a suicide attack. So they roll up and they blow up and have this high damage area of effect attack, but it kills the Baneling to do it. I don't particularly like them because it does kill the Baneling, but they're very popular in competitive play and have been for quite a while. Next up, they have the defensive structures, the Spine Crawler, which is these tentacle things that hit ground units, and the Spore Crawler that hits air units. The Spore Crawler is a detector. I rarely use either of them because they don't compare at all with your photon cannons or your bunkers. They're just not as sturdy, they don't do as much damage. They can uproot, they can move, but otherwise they're just inferior to any of the other defensive structures. So I rarely build them. This was a rare exception. In single-player campaigns, I build them more, but not in multiplayer. Next up, we have the advanced structures, and I swear this won't take too long, and then we'll get back to the game. Next up, we have the advanced structures. The Hydralisk Den allows you to make Hydralisks, and also gives them the upgrade to speed and their attack range. The Infestation Pit allows you to build Infestors. It also unlocks the option to build a Hive, so that's one you have to build at some point to get up through the tech tree. And then you can also build a Lurker Den, which lets you mutate your Hydralisks into Lurkers, which are a lot of fun, and then also has upgrades for Lurkers. The Lurker burrows and shoots a line of spikes out, so it hits everything in that line and does a lot of damage to ground troops, but can't hit air. So it sacrifices that flexibility and mobility of Hydralisks for being a lot tougher, doing insane damage to things like Zealots or Marines, and just being an all-around nuisance. Like, they're very fun to play with. I definitely would say try them out if you haven't. Next up, of course, we have the Spire, which is one of the most critical structures in the entire Zerg arsenal, because they allow you to build your air units. So your Mutalisks, your Corruptors, and I believe the Defiler as well come out of that. Mutalisks and Corruptors. And each of these has tooltips that tells you actually what it unlocks. And most of them are just a single thing. But yeah, and then the Spire can upgrade into a Greater Spire, which allows your Corruptors to evolve into the anti-air siege mode. And we'll see that in this game. So here's my Ultralisk Den, and this has a extra armor, like a really big armor upgrade and a really big speed upgrade for your Ultralisks. And then the last building on our list, well, Ultralisk Den. And then last up we have the Nidus Network, which is the Zerg mass transport option. Now I mentioned that Overlords can be evolved to have the Ventral Sack so they can transport units, but if you want to carry a bunch of stuff very quickly, a Nidus Network is a lot of fun. So this is a single entry point. You can have stuff load into that. So as you mutate, as I hatch these guys, I set their waypoint to be this. They'll just enter the Nidus Network. At any time, I can, anywhere that I have visibility and creep, I can drop a Nidus Worm. So, well, excuse me, if I have visibility. So I could drop a Nidus Worm right here. It would pop up. There'd be this big dramatic artwork and a scary noise that'll make everyone nervous. And then anything that's in the Nidus Network can be unloaded from that point, or any other Nidus Worm I happen to have on the map. So it's a very quick way to move your units around the board in a way that the other factions can't do, but it is expensive. It's a little bit slower than some of the other ways that like Terran and Protoss have, but what it does let you do is move a giant mass of stuff. And even if they kill your Nidus Worm, as long as your Nidus Network building is still there, the stuff still in it that hasn't disembarked yet won't die. And that's a huge bonus, that you keep that stuff alive even as you're losing your Nidus Worms. So I'm going to go ahead and watch this. So we've got, just to recap, we've got a bunch of Cyclones coming in from my brother, and then my Ultralisks are loading up into my Nidus Canal, and then my Zerglings are here doing whatever. Oh, we found a scout. That's going on, and then I haven't... Oh, he pulls them back because I started attacking with my Zerglings. So he's not sure how big of an attack that's going to be or if he should deal with it. And then changes his mind because it's just a bunch of Zerglings. And there's not much out here that he's got to worry about. Cyclones come in. They're looking for expansions. He's trying to do the... Oh, and there's my Nidus Worm. And these guys came in, and that rare case where I actually built ground defenses turned out to be very helpful here. And there's that big scary sound and dramatic animation of the Nidus Worm going up. And at this point, I did send my Ultralisks to deal with those. Very glad I had them on hand, otherwise that could have been bad. He's got one Marine attacking me here. This is the same nephew that attacked me with a single Zealot and beat me in one game not too long ago. An incident that I will not repeat. So we're just going to drop one Ultralisk in his face. But then here I was able to just unload my Ultralisks, and this poor Marine is over here, and neither of us were aware of each other. So I produced the Ultralisks here. I wanted them to be somewhere across the map so I could get them out quickly, but somewhere safe, so the Nidus Worm wouldn't be immediately destroyed. I should have been more aggressive with it, but then I was more aggressive with them later, and every single one I put out died. And I built a Queen here that took care of the Marine as well. And then the reinforcements were taken care of. And now I should highlight here that orange and purple have been attacking each other basically this whole game. So both of them are way behind where they should be in terms of like economy and such. But there was a lot of yelling and cursing when this was noticed. And then these come in and they are scary, but they have to convert, they have to shift to hit ground targets. And so I just kind of avoided them and ran around. And I was also distracted doing something over here when this was happening. And so... and there he found my Nidus Worm right away. And so I knew that was coming too. So that's an advantage of that, even though I lost my Nidus Worm. And you can see how durable these things are. Like, they're crazy durable and do a lot of damage very quickly, even just 4 of them. But they are going down because they don't have any leveling up. They don't have the armor upgrade from the Ultralisk Den, and they don't have any upgrades from the Evolution Pit. Now, what else did I have? Because this is a scary attack force, and I don't know how we dealt with this. It may just have been the photon cannon defense that actually held these guys back. Yeah, okay, so the combination of the photon cannons and then also my spine crawlers took care of that. Okay. Had that avoided these and attacked my expansion instead, I would have been absolutely toast. But here you can see these have done so much damage before they've been taken down. I don't understand how these work. They have a transform mode that lets them hit ground. Apparently you can just avoid it, because they only attack ground within that circle. Yeah, these scare the crap out of me because of what they can do to Ultralisks, or Mutalisks. I was right the first time. And then this demonstrates, you look at that mini-map, you see this just tide of stuff. I did my 0 hotkey and just mashed that Zergling button to spawn these guys, and then just threw them in there to see what they could do. And these now have... I believe it should show the upgrades you have here, but it doesn't. Yeah, so they have the speed upgrade and the attack speed upgrade. And in this game, I didn't even make an... oh, there it is. So I've got my evolution chamber. I can start updating these so they're melee attacks, ranged attacks, armor of all your ground units. Just going in here. And he's got a lot of Marines, so I didn't expect this to go anywhere. But you can kind of see upgraded Zerglings, like they trade favorably, cost point for point, they trade very favorably. This didn't go very well. He had a good defense to stop me here. And now you've seen basically all I've seen, so I haven't been looking at the kind of secret tech updates that the Terran players have been doing. And now here, I'm starting to throw drones around. I don't actually know where those guys are going. They're probably going to my expansions. That's the downside of that hotkey, is you don't know which hatchery larvae are from. So you still want to select your individual larvae to go ahead and create your guys to send them over here. Still going through here, just ignoring this one Marine guarding the expand. And this is a moment where we really focus on our economy and building things back up. And this is the moment where my ground assaults have basically failed, right? So I did a bunch of economic damage to purple. I haven't done barely anything to orange except stop his tide of workers, except stop his attacks. So I'm ramping up my economy. I am researching my air upgrades, continuing to do my larva injection with my queens, and cranking out overlords. Now, we'll go ahead and, at the end, I'm going to make sure to talk about how to counter Zerg, because that's a really important piece to this whole thing. I'm kind of doing tips about how, oh, I just have 4 Ultralisks hanging in my Nidus network with nowhere to go. And then here, so I know that our end game is that we make tons of top tier air units, and there are going to be scary things coming. Probably battle cruisers. Definitely, I already know there are liberators, so I can't go mutalisks, because mutalisks get annihilated by these because they have the area effect thing. It's crazy. These things scare the heck out of me. But these absolutely destroy liberators. They also trade very favorably with battle cruisers and carriers because they're so much faster, and you can just crank out so many more of them. Faster, cheaper, and they hit really hard. You can see my economy is ramping up really aggressively. And so I'm cranking out corruptors. Not only am I building the corruptors because I want to take out air forces, but also I plan to mutate several of these into broodlords to deal with siege tanks, walls of marines, and whatnot. But then also I've got my ultralisks in here to cover ground a little bit while these guys have not evolved yet. And you can see that I'm just producing an insane number of these all at once. And you'll see that tide come over in just a minute. Blip, 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 blip. Just the sheer volume of stuff you can create at the same time. If you're saving up your resources, you're doing your larva injections, you're using your hotkeys, I'm able to build up a really phenomenal air force very quickly because I'm not being attacked. Because I have 4 resource collecting bases. Could have been more. And here go the probes dealing with this. I didn't see any of this. I wasn't watching this. I was busy watching my corruptors. And these probably run away or die. Oh, they're gonna do it. Do they take him down? Hero drones or hero probes. I think the Marine wins this. If he just attacked in the beginning, but if you take the shot, you don't know it's just one Marine until you get in there. So I get it. So I already have my greater spire. I need more overlords to do the evolution because the evolution from a corruptor to a broodlord takes an additional 2. I don't know if it's an additional 2 or if it's just takes 2. Yeah, I mean it may just replace it. So it takes the 2 that you already spent on the corruptor and then adds 2 more. I know, it just replaces the 2 you already spent. It doesn't cost additional. That'd be weird if they cost 4 supply each. But maybe they do. We'll see in a minute. So you can see I've just got this ridiculous cloud of corruptors. And now I know I can't attack with these, though, because they have no ground defense. Like, they can't do anything against ground attackers. And so I have to mutate these into broodlords, or the alternative, if I want to be more aggressive, is I could spend some of those minerals to crank out a sea of zerglings to attack at the same time. So the corruptors clear the air, the zerglings are there to jump on stuff on the ground. The problem with that, though, is that zerglings have a lot of really hard counters. You saw the bunkers, you saw the marines. Oh, I just sent these guys over here to deal with an expansion. But you saw the bunkers, the marines, and siege tanks, how quickly they took care of the zerglings, and even a couple ultralisks. Not the heavily upgraded ones that these are now. So I don't really want to rely on zerglings because they will die too quickly, and then leave my corruptors exposed, and then this entire fleet of corruptors could die to like 4 marines. They're quick enough to get away, but they could take it probably wouldn't be 4 marines, it'd be like 30 marines who would just chew this to pieces. So I had to make sure I had my guardians up, or not guardians, broodlords. Going back to StarCraft 1, I had to make sure I had my evolved corruptors into the broodlord, because broodlords will just mulch marines and siege tanks. And so at this point, this is enough I could easily attack with, but I wanted to have a little bit more. And now I knew they were battlecruisers, so I was like, I feel good about my corruptors. Now that was really timely that they chose to attack the ultralisks, because had I not seen that, I would have been busy attacking purple, and it would have taken me a lot longer to react to any air attack they did. So I attacked this expansion because I saw it, trying to bait out those battlecruisers. Orange kind of thought about this, was like, do I engage that wall of corruptors, or do I try to hit something squishy? And he hit something squishy. And now this is a base that has very little resources left, so he's not doing me any terrible economic damage. But my spawning pool is here, my hive is here, my spire is here. Those are 3 key buildings where if I lose one of those, that sets me back a long time. And it was really hard to replace those. So as a Zerg player, you should make an effort to have an extra of those if you have the resources to do it. And as somebody playing against Zerg, those should be priority targets. Taking out my spawning pool was a really, really good play. He should have taken out my spire. That would have stopped me from reinforcing this. But also he wasn't expecting to just get completely dove on by that. In any normal game, with strangers, you would never ever expect a random Zerg player to crank out a wall of corruptors, and they would never expect you to dive 6 battlecruisers into a back line somewhere. Ooh, I didn't even see those ones. So yeah, that was a very smart play, but I was prepared for it because I knew that massed Air Force and massed Advanced Air Force is what was going on, and my ground attack is going to be done with Broodlords, so I know that that's what's going to happen. So I know that I want to do that, and that's why I had this ready. So I've got 5 Broodlords here, and that should be plenty to do the attack, so I think I went and did it. I didn't even realize this was going on. There was a lot of yelling and cursing, but I was also very focused on what I was doing too. And then purple and orange are still attacking each other a little bit, which certainly helps. Get that free-for-all joy there. Ooh, nasty. Yamato cannoning the pylon to shut those down. Got a random Ultralisk with that speed upgrade. Look how quick these things are with that speed upgrade. That is wild. So these things with their durability and that speed, even though they can't attack air, they're very frightening. And I was looking to see if that rebuilt, not. And I think this really, really won me this game, is that I was able to get that expansion, the high yield resource, and then this one. And then he didn't build any others, either because of being a shortage of resources or just being shut down by purple here on his flanks. A lot of reasons. But still got a decent collection like this. I can't attack this with Ultralisks or Zerglings. They'll just eat it alive, which is why it's built this way. And notice they're a little bit further back because they can't get too close to purple. Man, these guys are just still over there making a mess. Oh, and here we go. So I pop in, immediately target the Liberators with my anti-air stuff. And I outnumber them dramatically, but look at how much damage they did there. That'd have been a slightly larger fleet of Liberators if they'd all been there at the same time. This entire fleet of Corruptors could have dropped in half instantly. And of course, I've got way too many Broodlords, but I was a little concerned about Thors. 2 of the best counters to this Air Force are, of course, Liberators, just more of them, and then Thors. Thors on the ground, Vikings are less good just because they're single target. They're not good against this many things. They're better. They're really good when they outnumber what they're up against. But watch this. So the Corruptors are so much faster and have no air targets to hit, so when I attack move, the Corruptors get really deep. So something like a Thor over here could be just taking these guys out all over the place before my Guardians get in, or my Broodlords get in to take care of it. That is a lot of Broodlords. I think I overdid the Broodlords. I was afraid of losing some because in the previous game, I believe I had lost enough that I was actually turned back and had to start my attack over. I may have lost that game, actually. But right there, you can see that missile turret almost took some out, and I had to watch them very closely. So the missile turret and those Marines would very comfortably have taken out my Corruptors. So you got to be really careful with a mixed force like this, where one can only hit air and one can only hit ground. So one quit because I basically annihilated him, and then orange was here. And orange was still doing really well up top there, but this defense forced him to pull back even that, or this attack forced him to pull back even that last battlecruiser. And then we got this going on. And you just see and the orange is surrendered at this point, and you just see the volume of damage those Broodlords do. And the trick to them is they throw these little things that do the actual damage for them. Those also absorb attacks, so stuff isn't going to be attacking your Broodlords or your Corruptors while there are Broodlings on the ground to shoot at. The auto attack will just go ahead and focus on those, just like a carrier with the little fighter shuttles. The fighter shuttles take all of the offense, really, unless somebody force attacks the Broodlords. And Broodlords are slow, they're durable, but they're not that durable, so if you target them down, they do go down quickly, especially with air units, so that's again why I have all these Corruptors in here. And then I turned on red. And there again, you can see a couple Stalkers could easily take this apart and then leave these guys vulnerable to anti-air. So now, while we're looking at this overwhelming force of Zerg, let's talk about how to counter Zerg. Early game aggression does well. Taking out those key structures I mentioned, you reduce the number of hatcheries, you take out their spire or their spawning pool. Those are priority targets because those really do hamper what the Zerg can do until they rebuild, and those are slow buildings to rebuild. Take out their queens so they can't do the larva injection. And then one kind of key thing I wanted to highlight here too is that these overlords are spread all over the map. They're kind of in weird spots in the back here, undefended. They're in here. It'd be really easy to hunt these down. And then if you can limit a Zerg supply cap to the point where they can't build additional stuff until they build overlords, you can build overlords quickly, but it takes your larva, It does take the time to build the overlords, it takes the resources to build the overlords, and they're easier to target and take down than supply depots or pylons are. Protoss always have extra supply because they're just pylons. You need pylons to do everything else. But Zerg and Terran, if you take out their supply, that's a really effective way to kind of deal with them, particularly Zerg, because those overlords are very vulnerable. If you attack them, they will run, and not necessarily towards the safest place. They will just run away. So you can kind of bait them into even worse defenses and really deal with them fairly easily. That also takes out Zerg's transport and takes out some of their most consistent detectors, so it frees up your invisible stuff to go through. So attack the spawning pool, attack the queens, attack the spire, attack the overlords. Not necessarily in that order, but roughly in that order. And then in terms of an attack force like this, I talked about some of the counters. Those liberators would absolutely have done this if they were massed up and attacked all at once, because they trickled in there a little bit, and so they weren't able to finish these off, but they did a lot more damage than I think my nephew thought they did. So they could very comfortably have taken this down. I wouldn't go anywhere near this with something like carriers or battlecruisers, because carriers and battlecruisers are trade very poorly. They're much slower, they can't run away. The corruptors, if they focus down the harder ships, they'll eat through them very quickly. So you want something that'll take these down, like those liberators. Protoss stuff, the Tempest is pretty good against these just because of the range. If you have mass Tempest, they should be able to take this down. I think they also have the Oracle. Not the Oracle. Where's the starport? I need to learn more about the Protoss units. I'm not really up to date on that, so I'm not going to speculate too much about that. But long-range area effect weapons will deal with this Air Force fairly effectively. One of the single best ways to deal with this, though, is a couple High Templar. Especially these guys. You throw in a couple psionic storms, that will just destroy this entire squad, and suddenly these guys are totally vulnerable to anti-air. The Broodlords themselves are less vulnerable to that, but Broodlords are so slow. You get 1 or 2 air units in here without the Corruptors, and they will take these apart very quickly. They're extremely slow, have no anti-air whatsoever, so if you manage to deal with the Corruptors, the Broodlords become much easier to deal with. Now the downside of that is, with this force, you would need your Templar to be up here or something, so they hit the Corruptors before they get hit by the Broodlords. Or you time it so it's when the Broodlords are attacking something else. But yeah, High Templar are a Zerg's worst nightmare, because they have that psionic storm that can just do epic damage in a large area. And if you don't run away from it, it'll just kill all your stuff. So, my dear nephews, learn to use your psionic storms. This was a particularly unfair match because I did benefit from some early game aggression myself. I had a ceasefire agreement with my neighbor until the very end, and these two did not. So these two were fighting with each other the entire game, which we should have been too. That did make it a little bit unfair, but did make this an ideal replay to watch to highlight Zerg. So we're going to go right back to the beginning. I'm going to talk through some of the key stuff again. Not going to be too long. Hatchery makes all your units. Overlords make all your supply. Drones are your building and harvesters. If you go all the way back to StarCraft I, I remember reading the StarCraft I manual, and there was this hilarious backbending lore explanation for why Zerg need Vespene and minerals. And it's all about they use Vespene to reinforce their armor, and all of their flying and floating and poison stuff they make with Vespene. So it's like, well, of course they need the same resources as the other races. It's not because of game balance and mechanics, it's because they're, this is why. So a little hand-wavy science there. Vulnerable points to attack, of course, overlords, drones, and then your queen or whatever is here, and then also the spawning pool. Spawning pool is usually going to be in a back corner somewhere fairly safe, so you can poach it from a back corner, and it's usually not very well defended. I say that. Another thing to note is kind of late in the game, and let's jump ahead a little. Well, and then so the queen is a really key piece if you are playing Zerg, because you want to do that larva injection to do that thing at all. And hotkeying your multiple hatcheries together really helps produce units quickly. That's absolute time saver and will probably save you some games, or win you some games when you're able to do that aggression that quickly. You do want to crank out a good chunk of Zerglings early, just for defense, but then also for the early game offense if the defense is not needed. They're really fun to play with and really fun to micro, where you go into attack and then run away, go around another swishy spot and attack there, and then run away. They're so quick with that speed upgrade that they are a very effective piece to poke holes where there are defensive gaps. I'm going to jump quite a bit ahead here because I wanted to highlight something else as well. In terms of countering Zerg have, well, especially like your mineral expansions rarely have defenses, right? Aside from units themselves. Now, For Zerg, they have one advantage that every single expansion has a unit-producing building. It can make your tanks, it can make your air force, it can make your fast anti-infantry units, and fairly quickly. But at the same time, they don't have any defenses themselves. So a quick marine rush here would have, 10 marines would have been able to take out this base in a second. 10 marines at both places would have been a huge problem for me. And so those expansions, you want to find those, you want to stop them, because Zerg are more reliant on expansions than most other factions. And their expansions are more vulnerable than most. And their attack forces tend to be sacrificial. They do a lot of suicide attacks or all-in attacks where they don't really use the defensive structures. The queens aren't all that impressive on defense. So Zerg are very, very aggressive, which does mean if you put pressure on them, it reduces the pressure you're going to take, because they have to pull their attacks back, or their attacks will be less effective, or they won't be able to follow up just because you've taken them out, which is true of every single race. But the Protoss have defenses like this that you just leave up all game, and then Terran have that, and then Protoss have stuff like this that you just leave up all game. Zerg don't really have that. They don't have photon cannons, they don't have camping stalkers, they don't have siege tanks and bunkers, they don't have missile turrets. Their equivalents are weaker and less dangerous. So attack Zerg and attack them a lot. But also Turtle. This is a really effective ground defense. I did not throw any other Zerglings in here because I couldn't, or because they would just be totally useless. This would just repair up and fix everything. I probably wouldn't do any damage, no matter how many Zerglings I threw in here. Yeah. Likewise, these are a great defense against Mutalisks, so I didn't build Mutalisks, but had I built Mutalisks, it would have been real gross. I could have popped in over here and just annihilated this base, run back in here and hit this before anything was able to react. But one Liberator, I think in the anti-air mode, will destroy a lot of Mutalisks, so I don't do Mutalisks against these guys. Ultralisks are a lot of fun. You don't see them in play very much, but if you're... One potential build you can take is if you start the early game by upgrading your Zerglings. You upgrade their armor, you upgrade their ground weapons. Those armor and ground weapons also upgrade Ultralisks, so in your middle and late game, you can kind of throw Ultralisks around, and they're hard to deal with. You can just throw a couple of them at individual expansions and just kind of hit squishy stuff, and it's not a big sacrifice to you, but takes a lot of effort for your opponents to deal with. So I'm kind of switching here between what to do with Zerg and what to do against Zerg. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but it's just all Zerg all the time. Yeah, we're going to kind of leave it at that. Zerg is the faction I am now most comfortable with, having kind of refreshed in the last couple months, and my personal favorite. So it's the one I'm most qualified to do this video on. If there's a lot of interest, I could also try playing a bit more with some of the other factions and do something else for them. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway, if you're still with me, cheers. Till next time.